More red flags surfacing regarding this White House Correspondent's event incident. We're hearing from the federal judge assigned to the Cole Allen case, where the federal judge apologized to Cole Allen. Federal judge apologized to White House Correspondent dinner, the suspect in the shooting, Cole Allen, over the jail conditions. So Cole Allen, who was charged with attempted assassination of Donald Trump, he did an emergency motion saying that he was placed on suicide precautions in the DC jail and had been treated much differently than anyone else in the prison. He said it amounted to improper pretrial punishment, not having the access to his lawyers either, and being put in certain facilities that he said, he was being targeted. And the magistrate judge agreed. The magistrate judge Faruqi read the motion from Cole Allen and said he's very concerned about the way the DC jail has treated Cole Allen so far, putting him in extremely restrictive suicide watch protocols, despite a medical assessment saying that it was not necessary. This is how the Hill described the hearing. Judge very troubled by the treatment of accused White House Correspondent's dinner alleged gunman. The federal judge said on the record about the following. The judge raised concerns how Cole Allen was being placed on suicide watch, even though the medical opinion was that he didn't need to be on suicide watch. Cole Allen has repeatedly been strip searched over and over and over again and kept in constant isolation from other inmates in the general population. So they basically had put him in solitary, put him on suicide watch, and then they go into where he's being placed on suicide watch very frequently, make him get naked, strip search him, and then they've been repeating that over and over again. The judge said, I'm very troubled by what they indicate, the conditions that you have been subjected to. I'm sorry. The judge says, I'm sorry. It sounds like things have not been the way that they're supposed to. And so then Allen was finally taken off suicide watch, but still is being held separately from general population or other inmates. Then that triggered Jeanine Pirro responding. She's a former Fox host, and she's now the United States Attorney for the Washington, D.C. She posts a photo of Magistrate Judge Faruqi and a photo of Cole Allen, and it says, breaking, this is from Fox, U.S. Magistrate Judge Faruqi apologizes to White House Correspondents Association dinner shooting suspect Cole Allen over reported treatment in jail. And then Pirro goes, welcome to Washington, D.C., where U.S. Magistrate Judge Faruqi believes a defendant armed to the teeth and attempting to assassinate the president is entitled to preferential treatment and his confinement compared to every other defendant. It should also be noted then that Cole Allen filed a motion to disqualify Pirro and other federal prosecutors on the case, citing their statements like that one and other statements where they've said that they were victims of Cole Allen and that they now are witnesses in the case based on the statements that they've made at the time of the alleged incident, and then afterwards that they've injected themselves and that he intends to call them as witnesses. Now, Pirro then went on state regime media, which calls itself Fox, and she then is using this incident to say, look, what we're seeing right now are all of these leftists, as she likes to do, all these leftists, they're sending people into Washington, D.C. to engage in this types of behavior. So she's using it now as a broader pretext to go after what she says are leftist groups in general. Now, this comes at the same time that the Trump regime put out a counterterrorism report that's not getting nearly enough attention. And in this counterterrorism report, it says the biggest threats to America, they say, are jihadist groups and people who sympathize with the transgender community and leftists. They said there's a pro-transgender leftist ideology that needs to be investigated and that are being monitored. And they put that, said the jihadist terrorists and people who support transgender people, that's who are the biggest threats in a counterterrorism report. Here's what Pirro said on state regime media. I think we've got the clip.
But what I can tell you is that he hated the president of the United States. He hated the administration. And, you know, whatever that motivation might be, the truth is his intent is the only issue that I'm concerned about, not the motivation so much. But what we're seeing more and more of, Griff, is the fact that people are coming to the nation's capital with the intent to commit political violence. We saw it with the assault on the shooting at the Secret Service agent on the National Mall near the Washington Monument on Monday, and we will continue to see it. People, for some reason, think they can come here and that they can commit these acts that they'll get attention for to exercise their right to complain about what they think is unfair politics. And we've crossed the Rubicon because for some reason they think that they are allowed to violate the law, kill individuals if it satisfies what they think is their political moral compass.
I want to bring in Harry Litman from Talking Fed's YouTube channel, podcast, and Substack. Now, here's the thing, Harry. Someone like a Cole Allen, we could talk about Cole Allen, or we can talk about any similarly situated person who in our system still has a presumption of innocence. That's our system in the United States. If you don't like our system, there are other ones available. That's the system we have. When the Trump regime does these press conferences, Fox interviews, social media posts, and then they lie in the post as well, because the issue with Cole Allen was not getting preferential treatment. That's not what the judge said. The judge says that you were not giving equal treatment. You were treating this individual with excessive strip searches, and you were putting somebody on suicide watch when the medical diagnosis did not so require that, or actually said the opposite. So now what you're doing, whether we're talking about Cole Allen, whether we're talking about the individual who they allege was the pipe bomber going back to 2020, they're giving a lot of arguments also to say, look how we're being treated. Look, all of these procedural things, Harry, that you as a federal prosecutor would say, we can't, these are the types of things that you could get not guilties on technicalities, throughout the case, prosecutorial misconduct. You're seeing all this stuff here develop, which also to the outside observer, when you combine that with the fact that the Trump regime lies about everything, it's just like, why not just go through this like a normal case? Go through the exercises, go through the regular motions, treat this like a case. I get that it's more high profile. And then put the case before a jury. And if a jury finds somebody guilty, then they're guilty. And then we move on. But they engage in all of these things that outside observers who already have so many questions because the Trump regime lies about everything, they look at it and they go, oh, so it's just more of the same BS from this regime. It's more of this crap. And they allow that argument to be made when they behave this way, Harry.
Some of them may take it that way. Others may be influenced. And just starting here, Ben, this is really improper because it could influence the jury pool. It's such a typical Trumpian move. They sort of paint with a broad brush. All these people are coming in. All these people are coming in and think they are able to use their ideological views to do violence. We crossed the Rubicon. Excuse me? We crossed the Rubicon January 6, 2021, when it's really what happened and what was going on then. Those defendants went to the same jail, and you had members of Congress actually talking about how deplorable the conditions in that jail were. Look, there are two things going on here. The Meidas Mighty probably understand this, but when people are housed and detained before trial, it's usually in jails, different facilities that can be more rugged for starters. And the DC the so-called CTF is a notorious one, terrible sanitation and the like. But you really put your finger on it. There's nothing that he was saying that was about the general conditions, even though that's what the January 6th defendants before, supported by certain Republican members in Congress, were saying. He's saying they are singling him out. And look, it's absolutely the case that when a guy like him goes into the jailers and everyone knows what he's there for. And it's also the case, typically someone in the most notorious crime like this would get preferential treatment because you want to make so sure that nothing happens to him in jail. In other words, the DOJ, professional DOJ, would be extra careful. Here, the word seems to be nothing is too good for this guy in terms of jail conditions. What Perot said, her answer to these charges, were to refer back to the crime and say, oh, this is a guy who is charged with, and for good reason, maybe threatening assassination of the president. What the hell does that have to do with whether or not he gets terrible conditions in the jail, as he's alleging, and apparently the magistrate thinks it's something there. But it's so telling of their mindset that what Perot's response is to invoke the facts of the crime for which he's charged, which is completely blind to the general point you make that everyone has the right to a presumption of innocence. And just in general, if he is being subjected to all kinds of nasty stuff with the tacit knowledge or even encouragement of Perot and the DOJ, well, it would be of a piece with how they're handling this and the kind of, hey, even beyond the crime that they are trying to make here. But the basic stance of a Perot here that this is really preferential treatment is just a complete misunderstanding or really a purposeful distortion of what the magistrate was saying. But the whole approach is just the opposite of how you would treat someone charged with this kind of serious crime typically. So it could well be that he's being really singled out and getting treatment no prisoner deserves. At least the U.S. should answer this. But instead, they just basically say, here's what the guy did. Nothing's too good for him. Why don't we, bring in, the rack and nail to torture him, since that was what his alleged crime was.
Look, it's got to be a by the book person sometime. I mean, you got to do it by the book. It's, and I know Trump and this DOJ, they're not by the book. You just, there's a book, literally, there's a manual. There's literally a DOJ book, the DOJ manual, which is the guiding North Star for how DOJ lawyers look at these things. And then within the book, there are sub books, and there are rules and rules within the rules. And we live, and we should want to live, in a rules-based system. Yeah. And we may think that rules are rigid sometimes and all, but they exist for a reason. And whether we're talking about a rules-based international order or rules-based systems, when you and I go to law school, we learn the rules and we teach the rules because that's how you create predictability, certainty, and avoid mistrials and avoid situations where justice is not served. And it's just, you're seeing here absurd behavior on cases like this, that when they blow up, then the Trump regime, oh, the judge, Faruqi, look at him. He's got a last name like Faruqi. Let's post a photo of him and let's make implications there. And it's like, stop it. Just behave normally. Treat the guy the way you would normally treat the guy. Treat the prosecution the way you normally treat the prosecution. When you get a question from the press, say, you know what? It's an active case. We're going to let our motions do the speaking. We've already given the release. That's it. You're done. That's all you got to do.
Yeah, they never do that. And really, they run a risk. This is a strong case for them. Come on. We saw the video. She can talk about intent versus motivation. But this is something that you let the evidence do the talking. And instead, there are two ways that they're violating the rule book. First, as they always do, these incendiary and sometimes untrue statements talk about, that could be a basis for, let's say he's going to make a change of venue motion and there's all this nasty publicity from them, that could be a reason for reversing a conviction. But more generally, Ben, there is a specific rule book here. I've had some pretty high profile cases. This is even higher than them. But here's what you do. The defendant is doing just what you would expect the defendant to do, raising little things to kind of nip at the heels of the government. It looks as if Blanche made an extrajudicial statement, and it looks as if maybe the grand jury didn't hear everything. In the clear rule book here is be cool, DOJ. Understand this stuff is going to come at you because they don't really have the substance, and just let it go off your back. And instead, they take the bait, and Perot jumps onto Fox and screams and jumps up and down, creates more pretrial prejudice about what a terrible person this is. Oh, and by the way, they're flooding D.C. now with terrorists and transsexual sympathizers or whatever to come to do menace here. They are it's the opposite. And I'm not even talking now about ethics and the Constitution. I'm talking about basic competence. Be cool when you have a case like this, and don't get ruffled by there's going to be a dozen more little things that they'll try to make hay out of. And the more you bite on them, the more likely it is that a court will take them seriously, as indeed is happening right here, where you have a magistrate apologizing to the defendant, saying it looks as if, you were not given the kind of treatment that any prisoner deserves. Just stupid on top of everything else.
Everybody subscribe to Harry Litman's YouTube channel. It's called Talking Feds. So when this video ends, you hit subscribe here, you turn notifications on, you go to your search bar, you search Talking Feds, you go, oh, I know that guy. That's that handsome guy, Harry Litman, who I just saw with Ben. You subscribe right there, then subscribe to his podcast and his Substack with the same name. Thanks, Harry.
Thank you, handsome.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.